You can measure everything. You can measure television. You can measure the effects between, the spend and effect shares and the halos of, all the different, things that you're doing. That word of growth and that measurability and the fact that it can be translated to a spreadsheet, I think you are seeing more often than not these businesses that are very heavy, that their growth strategy revolves around marketing, are very much PE backed.
Over the next hour, we're going to unpack how Tinuiti, one of the leading performance marketing agencies, platforms in the US, managing over $4 billion in digital media annually, how they scaled under two private equity firms, first under Mountain Gate and now New Mountain Capital. We're also going to talk about what they're seeing across digital marketing for PE-backed companies in the context of increasing need for operational value creation and the rise of AI. With that, I'm thrilled to welcome Zach Morrison, CEO of Tinuiti.
Thank you for having me.
So Zach, welcome. Before we dig in to Tinuiti's story, I just want to start out with this question. So what is the one thing that you want the audience to walk away with today in terms of what you think makes or breaks digital marketing for PE-backed companies?
I think it really rests, I think you could use the word measurement, but I think it really comes down to, like alignment on data and numbers, and making sure that the marketers, the CFO, the PE firm, like everybody looks at the same numbers, or at least all the numbers are connected. And I think that is like the biggest make or break between, marketing and PE.
Yeah, I think you when we chatted last time, you had this great quote about how when you interact with PE-backed companies, they're actually dealing with like 6 CFOs, like one actual CFO and 5 deal team members who act like CFOs, right?
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really good quote. So that's great.
And everybody's also a marketer. In my career, I've learned that, everybody's a marketer too, because everybody's got an idea.
Everybody's got an idea. That's right. So I'm a big fan of Tinuiti as somebody who's kind of worked in marketing investments since my time at Providence. I've obviously been a big fan following along. But for those in the audience who are new to Tinuiti, I'd love to get a quick intro on the company, on yourself, how big the company is, what they do today, and what kind of companies you guys work with.
So thanks everybody for joining. As Edwin mentioned, I'm Zach Morrison, one of the founding members, CEO, and board member of Tinuiti. We're one of the largest independent digital marketing agencies. I usually say in the U.S., but U.S. is the biggest market, so I could probably say the world as well. So the business has been around 20 years. We started the business as a search marketing business, but really we actually started the business because we had our own digital marketing, our own businesses, lead gen, e-commerce, these different types of things, didn't come from the world of marketing or the world of agencies, and really saw this world of the internet and as Google and what transformed into modern performance and marketing as the opportunity to grow those businesses. Those businesses had some tough competitors in terms of like the Amazons of the world. So we chose not to maybe compete against those businesses as much as and saw the opportunity to take our entrepreneurial ventures to a different side of the world, which became what is now Tinuiti. So over the last 20 years, we've really transformed as the internet has transformed. We've transformed as consumer attention has transformed. And as the internet has transformed, and really today we, as you mentioned, we manage over $4 billion a year in media across all those most important media areas that matter. Those are the worlds of Google and search. That's in Meta and all things social. That's in Amazon and all things retail media. There's not even one name to list in TV and audio and display because there's so many. But everything from CTV to linear to audio and all the other aspects of the digital ecosystem, email and creative. But really, who we are today, right, is a technology and a measurement business that happens to do marketing and do media, because that really measurement is the catalyst to it. Tinuiti is, interesting in our client base. We work with, really the head all the way to the tail. Many, businesses in our world, will work with the small SMBs, or they'll work with the enterprises. We really work with both, because it's back to our foundation of working with the SMBs, when you first get started, all the way up to, the enterprises. We have some amazing stories where we worked with Motherly, which became Poppy. Poppy then, sold to Pepsi recently for billions of dollars, and we, Liquid IV into Unilever. And we work with the Poppies and the Liquid IVs still today, right? Those, startups, challenger brands. We focus very much on the world of commerce, and all things commerce, CPG, D2C, omni-channel retailers, consumer services, all in that category. A little over 1,000 people today, based in the U.S., but we also have the fastest growing side of our business is in, probably in Europe. Yeah,
Yeah.
as you mentioned, I've spent, the better part of 10 plus years now, being a private equity backed CEO. I actually call it 2.5 ventures, because we did a process, learned a lot about PE, put that one on hold to really, really learn about what was going to be the right partner for us. And then I also, Zach, not the CEO, spent some time being an exec and entrepreneur in residence, with some mid-market PE firms, and helping them with their platforms that they're building and growing, both on the marketing side and on the, what it takes to be a PE-backed CEO.
Yeah, no. So, I mean, you're all around the PE ecosystem. I think this might be a good time to ask about how you describe what it means to be a PE-backed company to your new employees. So, I think you shared a really interesting kind of approach that you have, when you onboard new employees that are coming into Tinuiti, and many of them, the millennials and Gen Zs, the younger crowd. So, do you want to share that with the audience? I thought it was fascinating.
Yeah, I do this, 3-slide presentation where it's on, vision, history and strategy, of the organization. And, when I get to, in the vision, we talk about culture of ownership and what that means. And part of that is everybody being an owner of the business. And then I, kind of have to talk about the ownership structure of the business. And that, kind of comes, in the history portion. And I have to, and I share that, our investors are myself and many of the management team, but, the primary is, private equity. And then I do this thing where I ask everybody on Zoom, like, do a thumbs up or thumbs down if you've ever worked with private equity before. And, people do that. And it's usually actually like a decent amount, or I say worked with, or kind of like your, family or spouse or somebody, like, and then I say, like, do a thumbs up, thumbs in the middle, or thumbs down on your perception, of private equity. And I don't think it'll be a secret to anybody on this call. But there's probably more middles and downs than there are ups. Now, if I ask my employees, people who have been here a while, probably get more thumbs up, than thumbs down. And there's an interesting thing I saw once that in the top 20 least respected professions, corporate executive, in finance, and marketing executives are 3 of the top 20. So I happen to have 3 of the least respected jobs in the world, all at the same time. But what I tell my team is, look, agencies don't have the greatest reputation either, nor do, private equity or bankers and everything. But I think there is a modern, version of them, and modern PEs and modern agencies actually have a lot in common. A PE's job, and I tell people, by the way, a lot of PEs, university endowments, retirement funds, pension funds, which are going to be benefiting most Americans' families. So your family's probably impacted by private equity doing well, but we have a lot in common. PE, pretty simple: raise money, invest money, get, return more than you invested. Well, marketing agencies, we go out, find clients, get their budget, spend the budget, and our job is to return more in revenue than we didn't spend. So there's a lot of similarities. We might dress different, have different backgrounds, but a lot of similarities in our business.
That's a great analogy. Probably undressed differently too, but that's a really fun way to kind of explain what private equity is to the general population. Which, to your point, in this day and age, like private equity it is everywhere. Before I ask about kind of your interaction with PE firms, I would actually just love to hear more about the Tinuiti story. So, I think you guys started in the search space and then eventually evolved into, the multi-platform measurement company that is today. But tell us a little bit about kind of the evolution, right? Like some of the
Yeah.
acquisitions you've done on the way, maybe under Mountain Gate, and then now under New Mountain. Like, how has that strategy evolved? And frankly, just as part of that, I'd love to hear about like at different stages of that. You've been the CEO, like how life was same or different as a younger company that wasn't PE backed and then became PE backed by a smaller PE firm, and then now probably the one of the largest kind of independent marketing firm today. So I'd love to hear about
Wow.
that.
All right. A
Yeah,
lot of questions.
a lot of
I'm gonna
questions.
all
Yeah,
in one. I'll break it down. I
yeah,
got like
yeah,
tell the vintages of Tenuity. I got, within there we'll talk about
yeah.
like kind of the difference in the, probably three of them. But like the vintages kind of go like this of Tenuity, right? 2004 to 2008. The vintage was all I like to tell our employees we weren't like a company. Like we were just, we had the other businesses, we were starting this, right? But it was really about like the skill and the kind of like the entrepreneurship that like paid search was new and we were doing it for our businesses. 8 to 12, that was really like the growth period. We won a lot of business. We started to expand, really like grow into a company and like, form, our base. And then I think the vintage of 12 to kind of 15, I think was the most important one that kind of led us to PE, right? During that 12 to 15 vintage of the business, we started expanding services a lot. The internet was changing, consumer attention was changing. There was social media and ads. Amazon was literally every box at our door. Well, okay, and then they were going to have ads, right? So we kind of saw the writing on the wall that if we were to go back to our days of running our own businesses, we would have our media and we would have our growth strategy across all of these. So we started building capabilities ourselves and building technology and then partnering with like other entrepreneurs who did other things in this digital ecosystem that we didn't do well or that they did, amazing. And these became some really close friends of mine, not just colleagues, but friends. And we'd always talk about like, oh, we should, put the companies together. And not because like we're dying to work together or any of that, but because we saw kind of the writing on the wall that like point solutions were going to be gone, right? And really the toughest question we were getting asked was everything across. But then we realized we had no money and no capabilities to put these companies together. So we really had like we all kind of had like a choice. We could all sell to strategics, or we could go get investors. Now, I think it's very different now in the rise of Shark Tank and in the world and podcasts like this. Like these things have become more mainstream. And in 2014 and 15, I don't think it was as mainstream. Especially in our, in the world that we lived in, for sure, it was not. We were one of, I believe, the first to really take, that private equity investment to that level, and many in our space, has. So in 2015, we were getting inbound all the time, and we met a variety of different strategics and global companies, and private equity. And private equity really was like the most interesting to us because we felt like we could just go do our vision that we had, right? Maybe take some chips off the table too, but we could go do the vision that we had without kind of like much interference or like being under, somebody else running our company. And that it would be the easiest catalyst to put these together. But there's many forms of private equity we learned during that time. And, we ended up deciding, mutually with the first firm that we were talking to during diligence that like, hey, it wasn't like the right, wasn't the right marriage. And a lot of it had to do with like getting a partner that truly like understood our business. I didn't think we wanted to spend a lot of time explaining what a CPC was when our vision was to go much, well
Exactly.
beyond, well beyond that. So we kind of put our head back down from 2015 to 2017, found an amazing partner in Mountain Gate Capital who spun out of, KRG. Work with a great team over there, led by Colton King. And we had just an incredible run because I think what really happened was I often use the analogy of that mid-market PE firm as like high school. We're like freshman year, your parents like, yeah, this is like serious, and let me teach you how to be a high schooler. It's not like middle school. And then like sophomore year, it's like, okay, you're getting serious. And then like junior year, like year three, like on you about like college. And then like senior year, you get in the, I don't know about you guys. I didn't apply to very hard schools to get into, but I got in, and then my parents like, all right, cool, on to the next kid, right? That we'll deal with at that point. So we had that amazing run, 3 acquisitions. We built the technology, built an incredible management team, right? But continued the culture, continued the vision that we had, put those companies together. We did 3 different types of acquisitions. I thought was amazing that we got to experience all 3. One that was scale, one that was scope, right, that we didn't do, and then one that was both. They had like 50% capability that we didn't do, and 50% that we did. We also rebranded from our original name and all of those names because we wanted to be one company to Tinuiti. So, it wasn't just like the 6x growth. I think it was also like we were ready to mature and as a business, and had the form the board for the first time and advisors. We were ready to mature, and I think that Mountain Gate really was the right partner to help us do that. And then at the end of 2020, we had to return more money than we promised, which we did. And we recapitalized onto to New Mountain Capital, and that's our partners today. And have continued that same mantra of continuing to build the culture, continuing to build the management team, execute on the vision, but then think bigger with the support of New Mountain. So I think that was and then really today Tinuiti has transformed as the industry has transformed, but we're also trying to stay ahead of it. We believe that all marketing is going digital, and all digital is measurable. So therefore, if you use the transitive property from 5th grade, all marketing is performance marketing, because the definition of performance marketing is measurable marketing. It is very commonly referred to as a tactic, like paid search or low funnel, and it's not. And because we believe that we had the right to be in all forms of marketing, TV, creative, but really we're like, no, we got to get out of our comfort zone. And that's what we've spent the past handful of years, is really putting measurement and data first and being a measurement business. We tried to license partners, but they're not built by media folks. We needed a measurement approach that sat right next to media buying. So they were interchangeable.
That's a phenomenal story. And I think what I love about like the story here is that it's a growth story, right? Like you guys built through organic growth, added capabilities, whether it was M&A or partnerships, and eventually, started out as a point solution that became the platform that is today. And I think in this day and age, right, there's a lot of discussions. The days of making easy money from low interest rates are gone, and people are really focused on this kind of operational value creation, and obviously, like growth and marketing is a big part of that. So I'd love to just hear, like, as you interact with, the CMOs of PE-backed companies, or CEOs of PE-backed companies, or even the private equity firms themselves, like, how's their kind of perception / use of marketing like evolved, since you started to today?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we work with a ton of PE-backed businesses. Yes, also VC and still entrepreneur-owned or public companies. We kind of work with them all, but I would say maybe the biggest exponential growth of clients that we worked with is, over the past handful of years, is PE-backed, businesses. And I think it's because like we both like what we do is growth marketing, right? What like modern PEs do is growth equity or growth investing. And I think marketing for a long time had this, connotation as a cost center, right? Because it wasn't something that could translate to a spreadsheet.
It was I think in some of the old books, as like marketing is perceived as like, hey, it's like one of the things you kind of have to do, but you can't really like measure what comes out of it.
Right.
But that's changed, right?
That's
with
the
digital
opposite.
Marketing. Yeah.
I mean, you can measure everything. You can measure television, right? You can measure the effects between, the spend and effect shares and the halos of, all the different, things that you're doing. There was that old saying, like 50% of my marketing works and the other, doesn't. I just don't know, like, which one it is. I butchered the quote there, but, But like that doesn't exist anymore. It's only a few percent, that doesn't, and nothing is, kind of, fully. But I think that, that word of growth and that measurability and the fact that it can be, translated to a spreadsheet, I think you are seeing more often than not these businesses that are very heavy, that their growth strategy revolves around marketing, are very much PE backed. I mean, it's no secret that like, home services category is probably one of the biggest categories of
Mm-hmm.
private equity, big of our client. And home services and improvement is very broad, but those are big marketing based businesses, right? And I think when those were hard to think about, I mean, I wasn't sitting in private equity rooms 20 years ago when they were like, we're never going to invest in a plumbing business, and now they all do. That they were saying that, but I think now it's like those businesses you can really drive growth, and really, but also it's not look, it is the growth. I would say it's like the growth is the majority of it, but it's like a controllable growth. It's a measurable, it's something that like you can apply operational discipline, to.
You obviously interact with a ton of different types of private equity firms, doing, I think, thinking about marketing at different levels and scope. And I'm sure they're all doing a great job, they're your clients. But I'd love to just hear maybe like, one or two specific examples of companies or firms that, maybe you've worked with recently, or something that's like, what are some of the key topics or key things that those kind of, you know, maybe like the ones that are doing the best or doing great things with marketing in the context of private equity, like what are they doing? Like what are they focused on?
I think I could probably put it into two categories that we work with. And that same Q&A mentioned like the work that we did with the Wrench Group, and there's some other ones, there's some other ones too that I can mention. But I think we kind of see, like PE businesses or PE backed businesses come in two ways as clients, right? One is I call them, they're the ones that throwing the fastball down the middle just all day long. Paid search, like search, search, search.
They
But
know
like,
what works, yeah.
and it's a big part of their business. But like when it becomes a big part of your business, you got to feel really confident, especially for a highly competitive thing. Like in the Wrench case, where they had so many brands doing it so many different ways, that you got to like be able to control that beast and make it an operational discipline growth engine, not just an entrepreneurial, or like, fly by the seat of your pants growth engine. And then and then go from fastball to have other pitches, right? And be able, to take it, to a full funnel, like get into social and TV and be able to measure all that. That's kind of like, bucket one that you could kind of put like the Wrench Group in that one. And then you have the other ones that like, it was, the Poppy story that I told, they were backed by like PE/VC, like kind of somewhere in between. Where it's, I think you have a brand that you've developed, right? But like now you're competing against like these national players, right? And you need to have a strategy that doesn't just replicate what look, I think that there are amazing people inside the biggest public CPGs in the world, and you should go hire some of those people to come help. But then you can't just run their playbook when you're a challenger, right? You gotta, combine the playbook and the modern. I think that's what we did, with Poppy. And I think those are kind of like the, mostly what I see, right? It's a huge part of your business, but you're probably just throwing fastballs, right? And it's not like so helping with that, making that fastball disciplined, but then also bringing in the other pitches. And then it's the other one where you can kind of, bridge the modern and the, the kind of legacy, ways of marketing.
I think PE is at an interesting intersection right now, because I think a lot of the consolidation plays we talked about, like HVAC, like plumbing, whatever it is, like it's the old school business models that they're trying to incorporate the more modern tactics of digital marketing, right? If you look at like some of the simplest things with like HVAC businesses, like sometimes they don't even have a website, right? And people don't even pick up the phone or whatever. They don't put out any ads or Google reviews, right? So
Those
definitely
are the old
like,
days. Not anymore. Not anymore.
yeah, not anymore, I'm sure. And I think in your shoes, I'm sure you're observing all of that, and I think you guys recently like had like a PE partnership summit, like hosting
Yeah.
like CMOs from PE backed companies. If you don't mind, I'd love to just hear like what are some nuggets of like learnings or concerns that were like discussed during that. Like what's top of mind for current executives in the field.
Yeah, I mean, look, we've done events for 20 years, like bringing in our CMOs, putting them together so they can learn from one another and put great people from Tinuiti up and great people from our partners like at Google and so on and so forth, up there. This event was interesting. It's one we've been talking about for years. Hadn't really done, but it was not just bringing in the CMOs and the SVPs and the VPs of PE-backed companies, but asking them to bring their partners at the PE firms with them, deal partners, operating partners, together. And I think what we really saw with that was like this story that marketing is a growth vector. Like it really is true. PEs are investing in that, whether it's investing in talent, investing in board members or resources, understanding like how important that is. But I think one of the parts that I love that we saw is everything was together in one room. And then we kind of like separated the groups to go into like much more detail, right? And I was in the group because I guess I'm closer to a PE guy these days than a marketer. So they had me with the PE firms, and they put the smart people, the smarter marketers in the room with the marketers. And we started like talking about the word playbooks. And I think there was like a general consensus that a playbook is a bad idea, right? Like that even the best PE operate like, and I know there's like PE playbooks. I'm talking about like marketing because PE firms invest in so many different types of businesses. What's PE's most famous quote? We're not operators. Even when they have operating partners, we're not operators, right? So you can't have and then three, like, well, they're eventually going to sell the business, right? That's the business that PE are in. So we all started talking about like learnings and cross collaboration. And I think it really came back to like blueprint was the word that we all started talking about as like how us as like the marketing partner and the operating partners, like how could we best support a portfolio companies and the marketers within there. And we felt that it was getting them in the room with other marketers that are inside the portfolio or even outside the portfolio. But B, sharing the blueprints and and where I take the blueprint is like experiences. Playbooks often are almost synonymous with like an opinion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Versus I think you could say like a blueprint or what we were trying to get at, we were trying to find a good analogy is experiences. Like what if if you take all the operating partners and you take all of the deal team and everybody within the private equity firm, you take all the deals they've ever done, like what worked and what didn't for who, right? What partners, what mediums, what ways, what technologies, this. And I think that can be really valuable. And I think there was like a general consensus that was, the right thing. And, I think where the other part was like, just like protecting against risk, right? Marketers by nature need to look at data, but also need to be intuitive. And, there's times that like, you need to take risks in marketing. And if you aren't, and you're just doing the spreadsheet and data, you probably could grow a business, right? But Corey Marchesotto, who is the CMO of Elf Cosmetics, they're now a public company, but were PE backed years ago. She's one of the best CMOs in the world because she like almost, it's not equal and it's not even balanced, but knows when it's intuition time and knows when it's like data time. And I think if PEs can help share those experiences, like when the right time is maybe for, in their experience of intuition and kind of avoid some of that risk.
Yeah, and hopefully all this discussions just lead to the same conclusion, which is just hire Tinuiti and they will take care of you.
Yeah, I mean, to me, that should just be the playbook. Like, if you're gonna have a playbook, just put Tinuiti in there and call it.
Tinuiti equals success.
Yeah, Tinuiti, and then we'll tell you who else. Because we don't do everything, but just put Tinuiti first, and then we'll tell you the rest.
Yeah, but on a more serious note, now that I think about it, like to your point about putting people in the room and sharing experiences, like throughout my career, I've seen a lot of like CEO summits, CFO summits.
Yep.
And maybe there's an industry need for CMO summits. Maybe some of them already exist, but at least thus far in my career, it's been less prominent.
I've been to a lot of annual meetings of private equity for many different ones. And you are right. There's CEO groups and CFO groups, and I'm seeing more and more with at least the consumer forward private equity firms, like realizing
Yeah.
like why limit it to those? And by the way, not just the CMO, right? What about chief sales and commercials and chief people officers? All of those can be benefit from that.
So another topic that I'd love to get your kind of thoughts on, operating partners. So it's been something that I think there's a little bit of a, it's like a mysterious role a little bit. Like, what is an operating partner? And by the way, I get a lot of DMs, a lot of emails, people that are asking about, hey, like I want to be an operating partner. Like, all right, okay, like what do you mean? Like, what's your background? Like, because there are a ton of different flavors of that. Like, what are your thoughts on like the role of an operating partner as a bridge to, I guess the in terms of like CMO and marketing and just making sure that PE firms and the PE-backed companies can actually interact and succeed within the context of digital marketing.
Yeah, look, I think it's a really interesting role. I mostly see it kind of in the larger PE firms than in the small, and probably the smaller or mid-market ones. I think when I was first introduced to the concept, I think I asked the question of like, well, what's the point of an operating partner? Is it to give me somebody who has experience in something that we're like not good at or we don't have somebody? Or is it to give us somebody with experience in what we do, whether that, meaning like our industry or, our clients? And I don't think I got a good answer on that in a good way, meaning that like, I think it depends. And I think kind of how do you put it? Like I think there should be like a continuum of the use of operating partners, and I think that's the best case here. Like, yeah, what do I like? The obvious use case is like you don't have a CFO or you don't have something great, getting that operating partner, to come help, or maybe your client base is so heavy in blank industry, and having an ex CEO, from that industry can help. But then sometimes I think it's like, having somebody, there's always the phrase like the CEO is, the loneliest job that's out there, right? They're never gonna, I'm not asking for empathy, don't want it, nor do I think I would ever get it. But having somebody that, that's done it before, I think can be really helpful. I think when you get to larger scale companies like ours, it's harder to find somebody who's like done it, right? So I think that's a challenge. So look, I think it depends on the evolution of the company, and I think all three of those things, can be valuable. I've always looked at boards, by the way, like putting your board should have somebody for each spoke of your strategy and of your flywheel, right? And have somebody that like can like your clients, your culture, like these. I think operating partners, the best, like my best experiences are when you have that people who have really actually worked in a business before and
Mhm.
have a specialty in an area. But I do think there have been in my career, I've seen some amazing operating partners that come from like, the consulting background, which I do give a lot of crap to that space. They should be on that 20 list. But people that have worked inside consultancies and then went to operating roles, I think, I have one right now, an operating partner who kind of did that, and that person's been helpful.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. Yeah, there are so many different flavors of it out there. I think there's a lot of confusion. Um, it's helpful to get your perspective though, just not only as someone who has clients in the PE space, but as a PE-backed CEO yourself. I want to spend a couple minutes on, I guess the biggest trending topic, which is AI, and I'd love to just get your thoughts on like what are the implications of AI when it comes to performance marketing, especially for like, in the context of PE-backed companies? Like, is that even real today? Like, how are they approaching it? Like, or how do you think it evolves from here on?
I think there's like two different ways to answer this. There's like me, like answering it from like my type of business for people that invest in marketing services, marketing technology, measurement services, measurement technology. And then there's like our clients, right, to answer it. Look, I think for, I think for both in general, like if Google and Meta and these guys wanted to put us out of business, like they would have been by now. They are AI companies. I think if the misconception that like AI is new is like one of the most annoying things I've ever heard. It's Gen AI is new, and
Yeah.
the like everyday person can use AI, but literally Google, that's like an AI business. How do you think they do what they do? Right? Machine learning, AI, and these things, Zuckerberg has this wonderful quote that he was like, one day you're just going to give me your bank account and your goal, and I'll do the rest. And everybody like really harped on that quote. I was like, please listen to the rest of what he just said. He said, like, but I only am one platform, right? And there's other platforms that are out there, and there will always be other platforms, even though I'm sure Zuckerberg's mind, he would love to crush everybody and, I think
Yeah.
be the
Just take
only
over the
one.
world. Yeah.
Yeah, but he does, say that like the thing that I won't be able to do and somebody's going to have to do is connect all of them and be creative. Like they can't do it, which by the way, that's what good non-point solution firms like mine do, right? So if you're a brand that relies on marketing or you are a business like mine, that's what we're focused on. We're focused at the intersection of all of these things, which measurement is at the intersection, creativity and creative and content are at the intersection, of these. One of the technology that, the advancement to our technology that we released today, that after this, I got to go post on LinkedIn about it, is, our new ad copy AI. And this isn't like just like a GBT to your a gem, like, hey, team, you can go build your ad copy. This is a real life product, a technology that pretty much like takes the creation of ad copy well beyond the human and well beyond just Gen AI, like bringing together brand, your brand book, right? Our best practices, what's worked, right? And creating it on the fly always and optimizing it always. So like, I think it's just going to make what we do, just even better. But it's going to be at intersections and at creativity, not at the keyboard. It's going to be at the, at the here and the here. I guess for those that aren't like staring at me, I'm pointing to my head and my mouth, and less here, which I'm pointing to my fingers on a keyboard.
Yeah. No, I mean, I would love to check that out, by the way. And, I do have this thesis that like with the proliferation of AI and the consequences of the effects of AI slob, just on the internet broadly, there's going to be even more need for human in the loop, and the content that is the top 10% content is going to get even more eyeballs than pre-AI, just because people are going to recognize that.
Yeah, look, I think eventually there's not even going to be a top 10% of content and creative, because it's like there's been a myth being told for a long time about personalization and hyper personalization in our space. Like that's really hard. Like that, like I've been doing that. That's really hard, right? Is it hyper personalization, or is it just like keyword insertion? We're gonna get to that point, right? Where like the top 10% of creative is going to be like on like a true one-to-one basis. And then therefore you're going to have to be ready to iterate that often, because you are going to be doing that, but we'll be able to do that, at scale.
Yeah, for sure. So, a problem for the future to solve. So I do want to kind of finish here with rapid fire questions. I know I didn't share this with you prior. So this is meant to be like a quick, just 20 seconds, just off the cuff type of thing.
I'll do my best. As you can tell, I'm long, long, maybe, I don't know if long-winded is the right word, but I will try to be succinct.
First question is, if you weren't leading Tinuiti, what business would you want to run?
A craft cocktail bar.
Craft cocktail bar. Okay.
If I'm gonna, I've been doing this 21 years. I need a break from my, if I'm gonna not do this, I'll probably take an intellectual break.
No, I like that.
No, but if I had to answer it, for real, I think there's something about local, like real local, that I think even in the AI world is gonna like still live on, like even in this doomsday world. So like something hyper local where I can kind of like, I don't know. That's what comes to mind.
A local cocktail bar for CMOs.
There
you got to niche down. Okay, second question. In one word, describe what makes a great CEO in a PE-backed company.
Patience.
You should elaborate on that.
No,
Elaborate on
you
that
said it.
point.
No. You
Okay.
said one
All
word.
right.
You
Just
promised
one
me
word.
one.
All right. Okay. All right. I'll take that. All right. So last question is a book, podcast, or resource you recommend for the investors and operators who are in the audience today.
I don't know. You gave me a plug, so I give you one. Yours. I'm a book, a podcast. So little in fact, I don't like no joke. Those are like the only books I've ever really read. But like Blinkist and Get Abstract, like the summaries, I'm a big fan of those. A book. I love the All In podcast. I know it's not like directly to PE, but and then Acquired. I think
Acquired.
Acquired.
Yeah.
I love that. Like that one. Now my ADHD, I can't sit down for 8.5 hours. So I kind of like have to get the summary of Acquired. But so, for those who don't know, it's like an 8 hour podcast. So they just cover one company and every evolution and every detail. So yeah, those would be the ones that I would pick.
Yeah, no, I mean that's like a whole new level of just journalism, research, content
Yeah.
creation. That's yeah, no, that's a
Look, and
good
I
one.
think like understanding life cycles of business, I think is really important. Like while PEs typically operate in what 4 to 6, 5 to 7, whichever one, I still just find a lot of intrigue from understanding kind of all the evolutions of a business.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, that's a great one. Okay, so we're gonna transition to Q&A. So people, please feel free to submit questions. So the first one, for home improvement businesses that do not sell products online, such as cabinetry installation slash design, HVAC, etc. How do you effectively set up the rails so your performance marketing can be tracked? And he did mention the Wrench Group as one of the example projects that you guys have done.
Yeah, we've been, so one of the first clients, so I had a lead gen site in the home services space, alarmquotes.net, RIP, that died 20 years ago, and some others. But one of our earliest clients, like literally 2007, was a Service Master Group, which at the time included Terminex and True Green and Merry Maids and all these different, lead gen businesses. And they were, so right, in this exact category. You didn't sell anything online. I mean, you can sell some of this stuff online, but we called it, and they were doing a lot of yellow pages and TV. And really what we spoke to them about were why we were successful with them and still successful today was this concept of closed loop optimization, right? Lead form, phone call tracking, right? The Invocas of the world, having that in place, right? Connected to your service titan or whatever, platform they are using. And like the work to set up your website, the tracking mechanism of the lead and the phone call, right? That needs to connect to the service titan or whatever your platform that you're using to operate, and then connect it to the ERP. All of those steps is exactly like what needs to be done. And then frankly, you can be just as, if not more dangerous than like somebody selling black t-shirts in marketing because you have a higher ticket item and higher profitability.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can really understand your customer. So that's at like the most, basic level, is that. And if you don't start with that and having all of those things, connected and speaking to one another, what you end up getting is Google says this, right? And then the operators of the business of the regions or the brands say, well, but I see this and I have this much capacity, right? And then the CFO says, all right, but I see this, and it's like, well, nobody can do anything, right? So that closed loop between all of those systems, and it's more intricate than that, is like the first thing you should do, right? Really, in theory, before you're spending money, but almost every brand and business in these, are spending money. But it's so important that those speak to one another because, kind of feeding backwards, okay, well, what jobs are closing and then where did they start from? Becomes the optimization engine because then you eventually get to, instead of optimizing towards leads or phone calls, you're optimizing, your campaigns and you're building your media mix model off of sales, which is ultimately in what these businesses they care, you care about. You can start to find some really interesting things. I've seen many times in my career, this was 20 years ago, but like where like bed bugs terms were like the best lead driving, but like they never turned into sales. So like if you don't do that, you'll end up optimizing towards things that drive leads or calls, but not sales.
Yeah. And I think we talked about this too, but you know, especially in more B2B services where the lead time, right? In consumer, right, you can reasonably spend and expect the consumer to purchase something over the next few days or whatever, but that's the kind of the goal. But in B2B, the lead time can be a little longer. Um, so how do you get confidence, right? Like, what are some of the early signs of KPIs that you should track that either will give you the confidence to say this is working or this is not working?
Yeah, I mean, look, I went to one of these public colleges where 98% of the people got in, UCF. Great, loved it, great time. But like, it's not that hard. Like, just think about your customer journey. What do? They go online, they come to an ad, right? Do they click or do they not? Great. What's the next thing that they do? They either pick up the phone or fill out a form or they don't, right? And then what do? They book an appointment or not. And then do they actually keep the appointment or not? Right?
Mm,
Do they schedule the service? Do they actually pay? So just, that whole closed loop that I just talked about, you got to track each one of those and you kind of have to begin optimizing to the earliest one. But like the best ones are the ones that get to the end, right? And be able to, yes, be able to look at sales. But it's just tracking the journey
yeah,
and
yeah,
then
but that's
measuring each
interesting.
aspect of the
Yeah.
journey, and then eventually moving on from that statistic, but letting that become a secondary metric instead of a primary metric.
Yeah, so really, really breaking down the buyer journey steps. That makes sense. Another question is, I know we've been talking a lot about digital media, and one of the readers asked questions about how some of the, at least in the SMB space, from his perspective, he's come across a lot of successful offline marketing strategies. And you talked about like local as well. So like, how do you think about online, offline? Is that one or the other? I guess, as a combination, like how do you do both successfully?
Yeah, well, I guess my point would be like, is there really a distinction actually today between online and offline? Like there's billboards, but there's digital billboards. And if you have, and even if it's not a digital billboard, what do people typically have on their billboards? Right? Blank x.com/123, right? Or they have a phone number, like a unique phone number, or what are a lot of people, the QR code. So I
Mm-hmm.
guess I would reject the premise that there is actually any offline, really marketing, anymore, because even activations, right? Like you go to, a football game and you're a hydration business like a Liquid IV and you do an amazing activation. Well, what are you doing at the activation? You're trying to collect email addresses, right? So I think I was rejecting the premise to begin that I actually believe in all of these things. I believe in hyper local. As I said, I wanted to be in the hyper local, the hyper local business, but there's programmatic direct mail these days. And when you get direct mail, what's on these pieces? So, yes, I think that so I think the question is like, do I see an evolution or an increase in these activities given AI? I think yes. And I think we're already even seeing it, in that, already in that space. But I think the like blinders of like, oh, well, people want to be off their screens and this stuff when they're locally. Yeah, sure. Meet them at that moment, but you still need to use the power of online to be able to measure, and get there. But
Mm-hmm. No.
I actually think the static billboard is better than the digital billboard because now you're like competing for space and time versus another. But then to just have the static billboard and not bring it digitally, meaning put a QR code on it, put some way that you can then measure it and get it into your CRM. I think that's just, you're probably, flushing money down the drain. And by flushing money down the drain, I mean that you might eventually stop doing it because you don't know whether it works and it was working, or that it isn't working and you continue to do it.
Yeah, no, to your point, like even if I get an ad offline at the end of the day, the bulk of the discovery and the purchase actually happens online, at least like on our phones or on laptops, and we ultimately get linked whether through the QR code or the links, right, to get to that kind of digital journey. Now, that's a really good point. I have another question, but this is less about digital marketing, but just more so you as a vendor to the PE ecosystem. And the question is, they're seeing a lot of agencies, other advisors trying to kind of break into the PE ecosystem. Like, what's Tinuiti's approach, and like how has it been how has it evolved to kind of get established as a kind of go-to vendor in the PE ecosystem?
Look, I'm an authenticity. It's in our DNA, meaning like we were working with clients that were PE backed before I think we even really understood what PE was. We've been PE backed. Like, I think our approach, like if I'm speaking to like somebody like who has another B2B business and they're trying to understand, like, I would ask yourself, like, is this in your DNA? Like, do your people and you really understand how private equity works? I think we really do. We understand it. And I'm not just talking about me and Chris and Alex, right, who lead our PE group. Like, we talk at our company huddles. When I onboard our employees, I'm telling them about how PE works. I'm talking about the difference between running a company for quarters, which is what public companies do, versus running them on annual cycles and 3 to 5 year horizons. Like, your people need to really understand PE. And I think our people really understand it because we've lived it. Our clients have lived it. It's authentic and it's true to us. That's number one. I think number two is like understanding like what cycle of PE like you're good at.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like, there are PEs, like really small private equity firms that invest in really small businesses. Then there is like Blackstone, right? And then there is like in between. I think understanding what you're good at and like working with the PE firms that also work with firms, like that. Right. So I think that is like another part. And like, we understand that. We understand like that, like, we're probably not going to work like if you've never done any digital marketing before, you know, unless you are like that's probably honestly not even PE, it's probably VC. Like, we're probably not the one for you, right? But like as I said earlier, weaving my way back, if you're just fastballing down the middle and you need like to have and maybe like the CEO or the entrepreneur was doing it himself, like, we're probably great for that. Like, we've experienced that. We understand that. Or you want to, you want to understand, go beyond the fastball, right? Like, or we're a bigger business now, right? Hundreds and hundreds of millions of revenue, like in billions of media. We're good at those, too. So it's understanding what you're good at and connecting with the right PE firms.
Yeah, no, to your point, there's so many different flavors of private equity out there, and it's since I've started the Road to Carry newsletter, it's been eye-opening, to be honest, just to see so many different types, even just so many different models of investors. Last question here for you, and this is interesting because we just talked about how many different flavors there are, but if you could give one advice to founders or operators joining a PE platform for the first time, what would it be?
No matter whether you are selling the minority or the majority, you're selling your business. And do not, and if something changes, then something will change. Like, you cannot, whether you're selling on to be selling onto private equity to be, they're going to be minority or majority, whether you're going to be the platform or an add-on, like, you are choosing change. You're choosing it. And respect that and understand that, like, there's a reason you're doing it. And if the reason is just money, then, amen, great. But like, your business is going to have to change because nobody buys a business. Nobody invests in a business. Nobody does any of that for things to stay the exact same way. So just understand that change is coming. And by the way, I share this with every business that I acquire, right? And I do this thing where I'm like, hey, I want somebody to describe to me what the company looked like 3 years ago. Then I say to somebody else, tell me how that's different than now. And then I tell people, look, your business changed without me and without PE. So just understand that it's not me, it's not PE, it's just what should happen. But also understand that PE has goals. They have a job to do, and just understand things are going to change.
Yeah. No, it's affecting change is definitely the big part of value creation, right? So well, we're at the top of the hour. I know this was well, from my perspective, I really appreciate the time, Zach, and this was a really fun conversation. I'm sure the audience has enjoyed the conversation as well. Well, so thank you again for the time, Zach.
Yeah, and love doing this stuff. Obviously, I spent a lot of my career now at this point in this world, both inside Tinuiti, and outside of it. LinkedIn or Zach.Morrison@Tinuiti.com. Please, shoot me an email. Whether you're on either side, whether it's you as the private equity person or one of your portfolio companies, or the CEOs. I'm happy to be a resource. This is a space that's been really helpful to my business and a lot of success. So I'm happy to pass that along and pay it forward,
Perfect.
including to you, my friend.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate it. Well, thank you, Zach.
All right, take care, everybody. Thank you.